They thought leaving you broken would be the end of your story. What they didn't expect was that your silence would become their loudest punishment. Sometimes, karma doesn't come with thunder. It comes quietly in the form of sleepless nights, racing thoughts, and a mirror they can't bear to face. They walked away like it meant nothing. But what if the universe remembered everything? They thought they could hurt you and disappear like nothing ever happened. No guilt, no consequence. They believed you'd fall apart, beg for closure, maybe even seek revenge. But here's what they never anticipated. The universe always keeps score. Every betrayal they delivered, every lie they told, every scar they left on your soul, it didn't vanish. It planted something, a seed. And while they were busy moving on, something deeper was unfolding behind the scenes. You didn't need to lash out. You didn't need to get even, because a force far greater than your rage had already begun the work. Silent justice, not with chaos, not with noise, but with divine precision. This isn't just karma. This is spiritual alignment, correcting the imbalance. And it hits harder than they could ever imagine, not through public shame or financial ruin, but through the quiet unraveling of their own peace of mind. They thought they could lie, cheat, use, and walk away untouched. But the first battlefield they lose isn't in the real world, it's within. Because no one, not even the most heartless, escapes their own conscience forever. You can block a number, delete a photo, unfollow an account, but you can't erase your memory. And when it's 2 a.m., when the world goes quiet and distractions fade, the whispers begin. Guilt doesn't scream, it echoes, softly, repeatedly. And it's in those quiet hours that the cracks start to form, not in their image, but in their soul. They might laugh with friends, post perfect pictures, pretend everything's fine, but underneath they feel it, a weight that won't go away, a haunting restlessness, a discomfort they can't name, like something unfinished is breathing down their neck. Let me tell you a true story. A woman once opened up about being abandoned by her closest friend, someone she trusted deeply. This friend disappeared when life got dark. No goodbye, no explanation, no apology. She just vanished. At first, it looked like she didn't care. She went on with her life, seemingly unaffected. But months later, she broke down. Quietly, she told mutual friends she couldn't sleep. Not because of gossip, not because she was exposed, but because of the guilt she couldn't escape. A song would play, and the memories returned. A place they'd once visited, now a ghost town in her heart. A quote about loyalty, suddenly unbearable to read. She didn't need punishment. Her own mind became the judge. That's the power of silence. Your silence became the mirror she couldn't look away from. You didn't lash out. You didn't beg or retaliate. You simply went quiet. And that silence, it echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. Because silence doesn't argue. It reveals. When they see your silence, they don't just see you. They see themselves. They see what they did. They start asking the questions they buried. Why did I do that? What if I was the problem? Did I just destroy something I'll never get back? That's not regret. That's internal collapse beginning. And that is emotional intelligence in motion. When you possess emotional intelligence, you stop needing revenge to feel strong. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply remove your energy and let them feel the cold consequences of disrupting your peace. Because the loss of peace is the first quiet warning from the universe. And trust me, restless nights and racing thoughts are just the beginning. There, punishment didn't come from you, it came from within. Just like we said before, when peace leaves their life, it doesn't make a scene, it whispers, and it never leaves quietly. You may not see it with your eyes, but trust me, they feel it. It begins so subtly, they almost miss it. A random thought, a sudden flashback, then it becomes a recurring dream, like an echo they can't mute. And slowly, they begin to fear their own silence. Because in the stillness, when everything else fades, your name returns. Along with the heaviness of what they did, they can fool the world with smiles, laughter, and busy lives. But they can't fool themselves. Not forever. This isn't revenge. This is nature correcting itself. The quiet recalibration of balance. In Stoic philosophy, every action has a consequence. Not always immediate, but always inevitable. When someone hurts a person who was real, loyal, and kind, someone who stood by them with open hands and an honest heart, they don't just lose that person. They lose something far deeper, a piece of their own peace. And suddenly, everything feels off. That calming presence is gone. The light energy that used to surround them vanished. And in its place, a strange emptiness. One that starts to echo like a wake-up call. But there's something here for us, too. A reminder worth holding on to. Your peace is your greatest currency, so guard it. Don't waste it proving you were right. Don't trade it for guilt trips or emotional revenge. Just walk away quietly, powerfully, with dignity. Because when their inner peace begins to crumble, when their conscience becomes the courtroom, that's when you know something far greater than you is already at work. And it's doing a much more effective job than vengeance ever could. There's a moment few notice, a shift when life starts quietly closing doors on those who used their free will to cause harm. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic warnings. It creeps in slowly, relentlessly. They still think they're in control, still think they're winning. But behind the curtain of their ego, life is recalibrating. And what begins is the law of withdrawal. Because when someone chooses to hurt a good soul deliberately, they don't just cause personal pain. They disturb something sacred, something bigger. Trust, loyalty, love, human dignity. And when that sacred energy is violated, the universe doesn't explode in fury. It responds with quiet, strategic removal. Not punishment. Alignment, opportunities dry up. Connections fade. Relationships grow cold. People begin to drift away without reason, without warning. Suddenly, they're no longer supported by the life they once moved so easily through. Not because someone cursed them, but because life no longer supports. Those who break its design, no door stays open forever. They may laugh today, convinced they got away clean. But one by one, those open doors begin to close. That dream job they thought was guaranteed, gone. That loyal friend they once manipulated, now distant. The admiration they used to receive, replaced with quiet suspicion. The easy path suddenly full of resistance. They'll blame timing, they'll blame luck, they'll blame everything except themselves. But deep down, a part of them knows this is fallout, a quiet storm, a consequence they didn't see coming. Have you ever watched someone who had it all, respect, influence, success, slowly lose their grip? People whisper, something about them feels off, they've changed. But here's the truth, they didn't change. The truth just finally caught up. Because dishonor carries weight, and that weight always arrives, sometimes as a failed business deal, sometimes as illness, sometimes as heartbreak they didn't expect, sometimes as a long string of bad luck they can't explain, not as punishment, but as realignment. See, they thought this was all about you, but it never was. When someone betrays you and walks away untouched, they assume the story ends there. They think because you stayed silent or chose healing over retaliation, their future remains intact. But the truth is, you were never the threat. You were the test of whether they'd honor what was sacred, and they failed. As you can see, when someone harms what is sacred, their removal isn't punishment. It's the universe offering protection. And now, life begins, quietly, removing them from paths they were never meant to walk in the first place. Not out of cruelty, but to prevent them from causing the same harm to others as they once did to you. There's a special kind of intelligence called emotional intelligence. It doesn't need evidence to believe, nor does it need to see others fall to feel justified. When you possess emotional intelligence, you no longer obsess over how karma will unfold. You don't need to witness their downfall to feel at peace. You simply observe in silence. You notice the doors that once opened for them, now slowly start to close. You see how they no longer smile the same way. The light in their eyes fades. They begin to repeat the same dysfunctional patterns. They sabotage their own progress and feel stuck without knowing why. You think it's just a coincidence. No, it's cause and effect operating on a deeper level, a level they've lost the ability to sense. Life is teaching them a lesson, quietly but deeply, like a tree whose roots have begun to rot. On the surface, the leaves still look green. The branches still sway in the wind. But beneath the ground, decay has already started. And one day, without warning, the tree collapses. Not because the wind was too strong, but because the foundation that once supported it is no longer there. And that's exactly what happens when someone loses the protection they once had through your presence. You weren't just a part of their life. You were the blessing that held everything together. And when they betrayed that blessing, the roots began to rot. So listen, don't knock on a door they locked from the inside. Don't hurt yourself for a door they chose to close. Let this be your reminder. When life removes someone from your path after they've hurt you, don't chase them. Don't knock on closed doors. Don't interfere with the divine correction of the universe. Because if you try to reattach what life is trying to release, you'll end up absorbing the consequences meant for them, not for you. Stay still. Stay silent. Let the doors close. It's not the end. It's protection for you and accountability for them. At first, they think they've gotten away with it. They walk away, believing the story is over. They think your silence is weakness, that your refusal to fight back means they won. But here's what they don't realize: life is preparing the mirror, and when the time is right, that mirror won't just show them what they've become. It will make them feel everything they once made you feel. Life doesn't always punish. Sometimes it reflects. The most divine form of justice doesn't come with thunder, not with wrath or fire falling from the sky. It comes through repetition of exactly what they once gave. They betrayed love. Life will show them what it feels like to be unloved, to be abandoned. They lied. Life will surround them with deception and doubt. They abandoned someone who was loyal. Life will make them feel invisible, as if no one wants to stay. They won't see it coming. But when it hits, they'll look around and ask, why does everyone treat me like this? Why? Can't I find someone who truly stays? Why do I keep meeting people who only use me? The answer isn't out there in the world. It's buried in their past. What they did to you has now become their new reality. They once made you feel invisible. Now no one sees them. They made you doubt yourself. Now they live in... They played with your emotions. Now they're surrounded by people who don't take them seriously. They taught life how to teach them, and life listened. They once mocked your silence. Now they live in a silence far heavier than yours. You once sat in silence, trying to heal, trying to make sense of pain that was never yours to carry. They laughed at your withdrawal, called you weak, too sensitive, too emotional. But now they live in silence too, with one difference. Your silence was for healing. Theirs is for torment. They reread old messages. They replay old conversations in their mind. And in every one of those quiet moments, they begin to feel what they were once too proud to understand. And then time passes. Life moves on as it always does. But something begins to shift, not in you, but in them. They return to the places once filled with your energy. The familiar cafes, the old streets, the corners of the house where your laughter once lived. But this time, you're no longer there. Only silence remains. And that silence, once the space where you found yourself again, now becomes a quiet judgment they cannot escape. What once was your strength is now there haunting. Because when emotional consequences strike harder than physical ones, there are wounds money can't heal. There's pain that no late apology can soothe. And when someone begins to feel the very things they once inflicted, that pain goes deeper than emotion. It touches the soul. It gnaws at them slowly, because deep down they know, this is what I did to someone who truly cared for me. And that realization, it doesn't just hurt. It transforms them, if they are humble, or it breaks them. If pride still rules their heart, it's a quiet punishment, invisible to most. Others may not notice a thing, but they do. They see it in the doubtful eyes of those around them, in the shallow relationships that never seem to last, in people walking away without closure, just as they once did to you, leaving you confused and wounded. A repeating cycle, a pattern only they can trace. And at its origin is you, more precisely what they did to you. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was quiet transformation. It was your response, without saying a word. Here's what you must remember. You didn't need to curse them. You didn't need to fight or prove anything. You just needed to survive the storm they created, so that one day they would walk into their own. And when that moment comes, they'll shudder and realize, I brought this upon myself. Not you, not karma. Them and the mirror that life holds up. It never lies. It never blinks. And it never shows mercy to those who haven't changed. You don't need to stand there watching them fall. You don't need to track their downfall or analyze their karma. Because the more you look back, the more you get pulled into the past. You unknowingly re-enter the story you already left behind. Let the mirror do what it was meant to do, and you just keep growing. That's the only reflection that matters now. You are no longer the person they hurt, no longer trapped in that old chapter now. You're walking forward with quiet confidence and an inner peace they may never find again. They feel it like an echo that never fades. I had something precious, and I shattered it with my own hands. The illusion of having endless choices disappears quicker than they expected. Because the ego plays a cruel trick. It convinces people that there's always someone better. That if someone challenges them to grow, to take responsibility, that person is too much. That if someone walks away, it's okay, because someone else will come with better energy. And yes, sometimes they do find someone new, but only for a little while, until they come across people who don't heal their wounds, but reflect their chaos right back at them, until they realize admiration without depth is empty. That now they're surrounded by those who only want what you once gave, but none are willing to become the kind of person you were. And it's in that moment, like a cold wave crashing down, that the truth hits. They didn't just lose a person, they lost the peace that person carried. And peace is not something you can fake or recreate. It's a kind of energy that only shows up when the right soul is near. There's a real story, a perfect example. A man once spoke about an old friend, someone he used, mocked, and neglected. She was always gentle, always patient, even when he was cruel. Eventually, she walked away. No drama, no anger, just silence. Years later, after heartbreaks, betrayals, and personal collapse, he admitted, "I thought she was boring, but now I realize she was the only one who ever truly cared. The only one who gave without expecting anything in return. Was too blind to see. She was a blessing." He tried to reach her, but her number had changed. She had grown out of the version of herself that tolerated his presence. She didn't hate him. She had simply sealed and risen beyond his reach forever. And that's why silence is the final proof of true worth. Being ignored by someone who once cared deeply, it doesn't hurt because of rejection. It hurts because it confirms something. They've elevated to a space where your chaos no longer has access. Your silence isn't revenge, it's evolution. It says, "I was the gift, and I have withdrawn that gift." They'll feel it when they try to recreate your energy and fail. When they meet people who only give to get something back, not out of love. When they lie awake at night, with conversations left unfinished, and messages left unread. Let them learn that lesson without you there to guide them, because you were the warmth in winter, the stillness in their storm, the clarity in their confusion, and now they're left with the life they chose. A life without your light. And the most powerful part, you don't need to say a word. You don't need to watch them fall apart. You don't need to prove you've moved on. Your absence says it all. It says you were something pure. They mishandled it, and now it's gone. Not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. You didn't have to act, didn't have to expose them, didn't seek revenge, because life, patient and precise, always finds a way to return them to the same pain they once put you through. Only now it wears a new disguise, one they can't escape. It's not punishment, it's reflection, and the lesson always hits harder when it shows up wearing their own behavior. The setup is quiet, but the impact is brutal. They once made you feel small, now they're being belittled. They once made you feel invisible, now they're being ignored. They once exploited your empathy, now they're being used by someone who fakes it. Even better. And here's the bitter twist. At first, they don't even see it. They feel drawn to someone new. They think, this is exciting, this feels intense, but it's not power, it's not love, it's something far more unsettling. It's familiarity they've just met. Another version of themselves. Soon enough, they'll start to taste the very bitterness they once served you. An emotional trap, except now, they're the ones caught in it. No way out. You remember that feeling, don't you? That constant haze, the split out, waiting for clarity from someone, that never came. Being blamed for things you never did. Now they're living in that same fog, a world of confusion where everything feels unstable, and slowly they begin to question themselves. Am I asking for too much? Or am I simply not enough? Do the people around me secretly resent me? Welcome to the emotional chaos they once created, a truth they used to avoid, now impossible to ignore. Because when the mirror no longer flatters, when it reflects back the very flaws they tried to hide, it's not just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. And then comes the realization: karma doesn't show up how they expected. They imagined karma as a dramatic fall, a scandal, a public unraveling. But karma is far more elegant. It doesn't crash through the door. It takes a smarter route. It sends someone into their life, someone who makes them doubt their worth, someone who praises them in public, but quietly undermines them in private, someone who makes them feel adored at first, like they've finally found real love, then turns cold, withdraws just when they begin to truly care, and suddenly they're chasing clarity from someone who mirrors exactly who they once were. It's painful, ironic, and there's nowhere left to hide from themselves. This realization doesn't hit all at once. It builds, slowly, until one morning they wake up emotionally drained, not from work, but from a weight they can't name. And then a quiet thought creeps in. Wait, is this how I made them feel? The shame is soft but deep, and it lingers. Because here's the truth: they might apologize to you, but they can't apologize to themselves. And maybe, just maybe, they'll try to find you to ask for forgiveness. But by then, you've already outgrown the chapter. You're no longer available to validate their awakening. You've become untouchable, not out of hate, but because you've evolved. You became the lesson they never saw coming. In choosing to hurt you, they thought they had control. But life made you their mirror, their reckoning, their silent teacher. Now, every time they're ghosted, every time they're dismissed, manipulated, made to feel like they don't matter, they think of you, not because you're doing anything, but because their own actions have found their way back home. That's not revenge. It's emotional education, a deeply personal kind of lesson. And the best part? You don't need to witness any of it. Let go of the urge to check if they're suffering. Stop tracking their life, waiting for justice to arrive. Because emotionally, intelligent people don't need proof. They just know what you do to someone who only meant you well. It always comes back. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but always, precisely that. So instead of watching their karma unfold, focus on your own peace, your new boundaries, that quiet confidence that doesn't need applause. Let their storm rage. You're building something stronger now. Inner strength. You didn't become what once broke you, and that is your power. You didn't mirror their cruelty. You didn't become bitter, manipulative, or cold. You healed. You grew. And now, you are the version of yourself they could never break. And that is the most humbling ending they'll ever receive. They thought everything had passed peacefully. But justice always arrives when no one expects it. You've probably asked yourself, why doesn't justice come sooner? Because if the moment they hurt you, life had instantly struck back, they would have never understood what they did. They'd blame bad luck, point fingers at someone else, or tell themselves, this must be karma for something else I did. But when karma comes after time has passed, after they're convinced they were right, after they've comfortably settled into the illusion that they won, after they've completely forgotten how they treated you, That's when it lands the hardest dot. Because now, there's no more confusion to hide behind. No one else to blame. No coincidences to cushion the fall. Only silence. And a bitter reckoning. That delay, it's protection. For you, you might believe, delayed justice is denied justice, but not always. Sometimes, the delay is there to give you space to grow. If karma had arrived too soon, you might have still been stuck there, emotionally entangled, checking in on them constantly, just waiting to see them fall. But now, you've grown past that. You no longer need to witness it. You've healed enough. You've outgrown the craving to see them suffer. And that's exactly when karma starts to work. It usually begins right when you stop needing it. And ironically, when it finally happens, you won't even feel joy. You'll just feel one thing. Confirmation that life doesn't move according to your clock. It follows a divine rhythm. We live in a world obsessed with speed, quick answers, quick results, quick revenge. But spiritual justice isn't a vending machine. It works more like the seasons. There's a time to plant, a time to nurture, a time of stillness, and then a time to harvest. What they did to you was a seed planted, but bitter fruit takes time to ripen. And when it finally does, it doesn't just show them their actions. It forces them to face who they've become. That's more powerful than any form of instant revenge. And you don't need to be there when it happens. Even if sometimes you imagine them calling you, confessing everything, begging for forgiveness. But the truth, more often than not, they just sit in silence, ashamed, too embarrassed to reach out, too guilty to find the words. They think of you randomly, in moments they can't explain. They see your name, your face, your energy. In every small act of kindness they no longer receive, and they carry that weight alone, because that's what divine justice does. It isolates those who once took connection for granted, want a real life. Example. Here's the story of someone who laughed too early. There was a woman, her husband left her for someone more exciting. He showed off on social media, bragged about his upgrade, publicly humiliated her. She didn't respond. She didn't retaliate. She simply rebuilt her life, quietly and privately. 5 years later, his new relationship collapsed. He was left bankrupt, alone, estranged from his kids. He messaged her again. She never replied, not out of hatred, but because she no longer lived in the emotional world where he left her. She said, "By the time life gave him what he deserved, I had already found my peace." And that was enough. Emotional intelligence. Let the delay humble you, not harden you. When justice takes its time, don't let bitterness rot your spirit. Don't assume silence means the universe has forgotten you. Instead, use that time to build your spiritual discipline, your emotional resilience, your mental clarity, and your self-worth unshakable and untouchable. Because when justice comes, it won't just deal with them, it will elevate you. When justice finally arrives, you might barely notice, not because it doesn't matter, but because you've long since moved past the pain. And that is the miraculous beauty of divine delay. It isn't just to punish someone. It allows you time to heal, to grow, and to surpass everything that once held you back. When those who hurt you eventually face the consequences, you'll no longer be standing there waiting. You'll be too busy, living a thriving life. And maybe, just maybe one day, they'll see your name, think of you, shake their head quietly, and whisper to themselves, "I should never have treated them that way. They were my blessing and now I've lost it forever." Sometimes what feels like rejection is actually a redirection. what feels like abandonment is actually invisible protection. You think they walked away. You think the door closed because you weren't enough. But what if that wasn't their choice? What if God removed you from that connection? You didn't walk away. You were intentionally pulled out by a higher design. There are moments in life that seem senseless. A relationship ends abruptly. A job opportunity slips away. A friend turns against you. A betrayal stabs your back. And you blame yourself. You replay every detail, thinking, if only I had tried harder, given more. But the truth is, you weren't meant to stay. You were being extracted from a space that would have destroyed your spirit at the time. You couldn't see that vantage point. God saw the conversations you weren't part of. He heard what was said behind closed doors. He saw the traps you never noticed. He heard them laugh while you were crying because he sees. He hears the words you would never believe. He saw patterns that your loyalty wouldn't let you question. And instead of sending you more signs, he gave you a way out. It may have felt sudden, painful, confusing, but it was surgical. He removed you from the poison before it touched your soul. You thought it collapsed. In truth, fell into place. We pray for peace, clarity, strength, but few realize some structures must crumble for those gifts to emerge. When things fall apart, it may feel like you've lost everything, but actually that was your rescue. Your prayers were heard, you just didn't recognize the answer. A friendship ended. A relationship broke. A connection died, but your peace was born. Clarity increased. Your soul began healing. That's not loss. That's deliverance. A real-life confession. A man once said, "There was a woman who loved me deeply. I was selfish, manipulative, deceitful. But before I could completely destroy her, she vanished. She didn't say goodbye. No explanation, no return." He continues, "Now I understand. She didn't leave me. God pulled her away from me. I wasn't worthy of a soul like hers. She didn't wait for the final blow. She was rescued before it ever landed." Spiritual discipline is trusting the exit without closure. Sometimes the hardest thing is trusting silence, unanswered prayers, a door slammed shut without warning. True faith doesn't require full understanding. It simply moves forward, even in the darkness. You don't need to know why it ended. You don't need to know what was said. You don't need an apology. All you need to know is your protection was prioritized over your comfort. God pulled you out not because you were broken, but because you were invaluable. Your absence was your salvation. The moment you disappeared from their life, they lost access to your grace, loyalty, and light. They didn't notice at first, but once everything around them started to shift, they realized a sacred presence had left hand, would never return. And then, by the time they realized your worth, you were already out of reach. Not because you were hiding, but because divine protection is a one-way door. Once it closes, it never opens again. Not for fake apologies, not for delayed guilt, not for nostalgia, only for the truth. And by the time they grow enough to be honest, you've already healed. No longer waiting, no longer hurting. Now your job is to honor that exit. You don't need to go searching for explanations. You don't need to step back into the room God has already pulled you out of. You don't need to fix what was never yours to carry. Instead, keep building your inner peace. Guard your soul. Stay aligned with your purpose. Respect the silent closures, the ones God orchestrated for your growth. Because there will come a time when the ones who hurt you will finally understand what they lost. But by then, you'll have gone so far that they can't reach you anymore. And that is not revenge. That is protection fulfilled. They didn't see it when they had you, because light never announces itself. It just quietly shines, faithfully, gently, unconditionally. You were the calm in their chaos, the forgiveness they never truly deserved, the understanding they didn't have to earn, the presence that made their world warmer without asking for a single thing in return. And they threw it away. Why? Because people used to dysfunction often mistake peace for boredom, and those addicted to control tend to see gentleness as weakness. So they discarded you, thinking you'd always be there, thinking you'd come back, thinking you'd never wake up to your own worth. But in your absence, reality began to speak. Pain didn't arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly through the smallest cracks. A conversation that fell flat because you weren't there to carry it. A bad day with no one left to soothe it. A moment of fear with no voice to calm it. A victory, but no one who truly cares. That's when your absence became louder than your presence ever was. They scroll through old messages. They silently check your profile. They think about texting, but don't, because deep down, they know they broke something they can never fix. They won't say it out loud, but they feel it deeply. You were the one who listened when they had no words, the one who stayed when everyone else walked away. You gave and gave and gave, until they assumed giving was just your default setting now. They live surrounded by noise, but feel no connection. They have people around, but no peace. They're in relationships, but feel utterly alone. They still post as if they're happy, still smile like they've moved on, still act like they've healed, but in their quietest moments, they think of you, not because of who they were with you, but because of who they'll never get to be again without you. Because regret is not the same as guilt. Guilt says, I feel bad for what I did. Deep regret whispers, I'll never have that again. You were the safest place they ever had. You were the blessing, and they lost it forever. Guilt is about actions. Regret is about consequences. But silent regret, that's about identity. They're not just sad, they lost you. They're shattered by who they became to push you away. And the worst part is, there's no way back. You know what? What hurts more than revenge is your silence. They expected rage. They braced for confrontation. They were ready for the blame, the tears, the emotional chaos. But you gave them none of that. You gave them silence. And that silence became a mirror reflecting everything they tried so hard to avoid. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation, the cowardice. Silence doesn't defend itself. It simply reveals. What words can't touch, silence makes visible. And in that silence, they finally began to see themselves. They once thought your silence was weakness, but now, that very silence has become a siren, forcing them to face themselves. And slowly, they begin to realize far too late. Now I understand. She was the only one who ever loved me without conditions, no agendas, no expectations, just love, simple, pure, and deep. And I pushed her away, just to feel powerful. He didn't cry the day she left, not a single tear. He just stood there, cold, pretending to be strong. But 2 years later, alone, surrounded by 4 walls, when the fake laughter faded, when success and fame became nothing more than lines on a resume, he broke down. He said, "Now I understand. Losing her wasn't a single moment. It was the slow collapse of everything real in my life. You were never too much. You were simply more than they could handle. They said you were too emotional, too intense. You cared too deeply. But now, that too much is exactly what they miss most. That intensity is what they crave. That caring is what they'll never find again. You were never a burden. You were an entire universe they weren't. Strong enough to hold, you were the light. In a world that had grown too comfortable in darkness, you were powerful without needing to prove it. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You didn't beg to be understood. You walked away, quietly, with dignity and peace. And now they live with a painful truth. Your silence speaks louder than any of their excuses. They'll never admit it, but they will always feel it, because once you've tasted real peace, nothing else will ever compare. And once you've lost it, you'll spend your life searching. You were kind, they were cruel, you gave everything. They took without remorse. You loved from your soul. They used you to fill their emptiness. And when it ended, they walked away with a smug smile, while you were left behind, gathering the pieces of a heart they never intended to protect. The world looked on and saw nothing special, no apologies, no justice, no proper goodbye. But what the world couldn't see, God did. He saw the nights he cried silently, the messages you deleted, the words you never sent, the pain you buried just to keep going. He saw the battles behind your eyes, even as you smiled in front of others. He saw it all, the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, and the cowardice, when you thought no one would ever speak for you. God took notes, not out of anger, but with precision. His justice doesn't arrive on your timeline. It comes right on time. The scales of justice do not rust in silence. Your lack of retaliation doesn't mean they got away with it. Because God doesn't judge by public outcomes. He judges by private motives. They thought they escaped, but they didn't realize a delay in justice is not a denial of it. Sometimes God lets them believe they're winning. So when the fall comes, they have no one to blame but their own reflection. That's not revenge. That's divine balance. And slowly, their life begins to unravel. Not with dramatic storms, but with quiet unraveling. Relationships grow empty. Trust collapses. Their reputation fades in subtle whispers. Confidence turns to paranoia. And then, a nameless weight clings to them, unseen, unspoken, but the peace they once knew is gone. They can't explain why success now feels meaningless, why love feels unreachable, why nothing truly fills the void. It's not a curse, it's consequence, because when you harm a pure soul, a soul that only meant good, the universe rearranges itself to teach you a lesson. God doesn't avenge to entertain. He restores with purpose. He doesn't hurt them so you'll feel better. He humbles them because divine justice isn't always destruction. Sometimes it's awakening. One day, unexpected, silent, they will wake up. They'll look back and realize, I once had something truly precious, and I destroyed it with my own hands. It's not a dramatic collapse. It's the quiet reckoning with consequences. They'll remember every whispered prayer you once said for them in your darkest nights, now transformed into a shield protecting you. As you step into a new chapter where they no longer belong. That's spiritual discipline. It's believing in justice even when you can't see it. It's accepting that you may never witness their downfall. You may never hear an apology. And you might never know just how deeply they regret it. But justice isn't for your entertainment. It exists for your evolution. You didn't walk away with proof or explanations. You walked away with peace. And that peace is your reward. God, deal with what they did. Let the universe echo back the pain they caused. Let your silence speak in places your voice could never reach. You don't have to tell the world your story, because God already wrote it fully and faithfully. You didn't lose. You were preserved. While they played games with your loyalty, God was quietly preparing something greater. While they laughed at your pain, He was building the next level of your life. And when they eventually fall into the very pit they dug for you, you won't even look back. You'll have gone too far, too blessed, too elevated, to return to the place you were rescued from. Let unseen justice unfold, while you continue to rise in silence. Because the most powerful spiritual move isn't revenge. It's no longer needing their apology, their explanation, or their collapse. You don't rise by pulling others down. You rise by refusing to sink with them. And when God sees that, He restores you, elevates you, protects you, because you honored His justice by not becoming like those who hurt you. There is a rare kind of strength, one that doesn't show up on social media. No spotlight, no applause, no trending #2. It's the power of restraint, of not clapping back, of not lowering yourself, of not becoming a distorted version of yourself just to get even. To the world, it may look like weakness, but to heaven, it looks like wisdom, because anyone can react. But only those with real inner power can stay composed, even when every part of them wants to scream. When they mocked your silence, God was recording your strength. When they laughed as you cried, He was marking your faithfulness. They thought they got away with it, but God was simply watching. What would you do with the pain? Would you seek revenge? Would you destroy them in return? Would you betray your own soul just to feel powerful for a moment? You didn't. You chose restraint. And restraint is the language of royalty. Why is silence sacred in spiritual warfare? Because your silence didn't mean surrender. It meant strategy. It meant you refused to fight battles that weren't yours. It meant you understood. What I'm facing isn't just flesh and blood. It's spiritual and real victory. Doesn't need to be loud. You let God fight where your hands couldn't reach. You didn't rush karma. You didn't sabotage your healing just to find closure. You held the line. You kept your peace, and heaven took note. The reward is not revenge. The reward is elevation. You won't always get the chance to give them what they deserve, but you will get the chance to be healed, to be restored, and that is infinitely more powerful. It's peace no one can steal, joy that doesn't depend on who stays, relationships aligned with your healed identity, opportunities that feel like divine compensation, confidence that doesn't need validation. One day you'll look around and say, what I thought I lost is nothing compared to what I was being prepared for. Because God doesn't repay you with pity. He repays you with purpose. And then, when you chose not revenge, but growth, that's when the miracle began. There was a woman who was publicly hurt by someone she trusted. She didn't expose him. She didn't run to social media. She didn't tell the full story to anyone. People looked at her and called her weak. But 3 years later, she built a company. She wrote a book, and she found love, a love that truly cherished her. And the man, still stuck in shallow cycles, chasing external validation. She didn't rise by revenge. She rose through resilience. That's the power of restraint. While others were busy playing in the mud, your silence was laying each brick for your own throne. What scares those who hurt you most isn't your anger, it's your growth. They can't believe you didn't fall apart, that you didn't stay bitter, that you didn't remain in the chapter where they left you. You rose and became something untouchable, not because you turned cold, but because you healed. They thought your silence was weakness, but in truth, it was sacred. It was your shield. It was your sword. It was your transformation in progress. God's greatest reward is not what you gain, but who you become. When you chose peace instead of revenge, you tapped into a power deeper than words. When you chose restraint, you gained clarity. When you refused to return evil with evil, you didn't just break a toxic pattern, you broke a generational chain of pain. That is the true reward. You didn't just survive betrayal, you became wiser, stronger, more aligned with the purpose you were born for. Now, you walk with quiet confidence, not because life didn't wound you, but because it couldn't destroy what God was building within you. So, if one day they ask, how are you still standing? How are you still glowing? How are you still growing? Without them, just smile and say, I gave it to God, and He gave me back my true self. You didn't lose, you were preserved, you were protected, and now you've been promoted. They hurt you, they left you, and they thought you'd never recover. But what they didn't know was, your silence was your weapon, and God was your witness. You didn't beg, you didn't break. You became unshakable, and now you don't even need to prove them wrong. Your peace already did. So if you're walking this path, if you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or mocked for staying silent, remember this: heaven has heard every silent tear. Justice is already moving quietly, but surely. And the next chapter of your life will not be written by those who tried to destroy you. It will be written by the strength you chose, when you had every reason to get even, but still chose forgiveness and growth. If this message speaks to your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who needs this truth. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Through Stoicism for weekly insights on emotional intelligence and inner strength. Drop a comment below. I choose peace over revenge. I choose growth over bitterness. Let the world know what side of the battle you stand on, because your silence is not weakness. It is spiritual discipline, and it will take you further than any noise ever could. The battle is over, but your rise has only just begun.